Okay, welcome everyone to our next session on Builders Education Series with MetaMasks. Today, MetaMask Snaps. Today's session is going to be on signature insights and dynamic UI. Just to get an idea of what is going to be included in today's session, let's look at a quick agenda. So we'll have a quick round of introductions, and we'll talk about what today's session is all about. Then we'll dive deeper into signature insights, dynamic UA, and then finally we'll wrap up with a round of Q&A, and hopefully we can get all the questions answered in today's session. So as an introduction, my name is Mario Christopher, and I'm a solutions architect with the Builders Engagement team at Consensus. We work with the MetaMask Snaps product team, and we are a line of interface between builders out there who are interested to build snaps and the product team. So we introduce the builders to the resources that are required for building a snap. We conduct sessions for them. We have onboarding calls and these builder series calls that we currently are in. And these calls are essential for builders so that they can understand the ecosystem, they can understand the product, they can understand what's required to build a successful snap. So talking about the Builder Education series, these are a set of calls which Christian has shared a YouTube link on the chat. These are a series of calls where we pick and choose certain topics within Snap development, and we focus on those topics for a call. So we invite all builders who are yet to allow us a snap, and the ones who are in the ecosystem already, so that they can understand what are the new features that are coming out in snaps, and if there are any changes in the APIs, how they would adapt their code for it, or just in general best practices. We've recently had some calls on best practices for UI design, best practices for security, and today's interesting call on signature insights and dynamic UI. So back to today's session, we are going to be talking about these two new features, which are really, really hot off the press. They are so hot that they aren't still in the Flask builds, which means they can only be accessed using a dev build. Another interesting aspect about these two features is that they are going to be highlighted in this upcoming ETH Denver. And we are going to be having a hackathon session with bounties, and the projects that are going to be built will be built around these two features, signature insights and dynamic UI. Since we do not have these in the regular Flask builds, you can go to this link, which is created in GitHub, where we talk about the bounty, we talk about the project, and we also have links in here for the builds that you can use. Make sure to use these builds for your projects, because that's what you'll be needing to demonstrate your project. These features work only in these dev builds. We would soon release it out in Flask, but for ETH Denver, please pick your browser and the builds from these links and go ahead and develop your project against these builds. All the code that we'll be looking at in today's session is also included on GitHub, so you can go to that link over there and find the code that will be demonstrated in today's session. So jumping into the features, signature insights. So signature insights, it provides arbitrary insights into signatures, as the name suggests, very similar to transaction insights. We've had transaction insights for a long time now, and many transactions have been passing through this feature where users have been safe about their transactions. They submit a transaction and the transaction insights looks into it and provides more information in terms of, is the contract a malicious one or not, or has there been any kind of malicious activity associated with this address, and so on and so forth. So we are extending that feature now into signatures also, which means it's not just a transaction that you would be getting the benefits from, but even a signature. If you are signing something, then this feature allows you to understand a little more about that signature, what you're signing, whether all the information in that signature is pertinent or non-malicious, and so on. It also helps making cryptographic signature inputs more intelligible to the user, because users, when they sign information, they don't really pay attention to all the nuances in the signature, all the pieces of data that's included. But the moment you pass it through and signature inside, it puts the information right in front of the user, whether they should actually sign this piece of data or not. We also provide a severity level for the signature, and this just is introduced to add a little more friction to the transaction confirmation. Say, for example, you are signing a message, and that message is malicious, but we want to explicitly say that this is really malicious. Please take a moment to look at it. We can provide a severity level. You, as a Snap developer, will be looking at that signature, will be doing your logic and understanding whether the signature is good to sign or not. And if it is indeed dealing with some malicious actors, you can provide a severity level to the signature, which means now the user has to go through an extra step of checking on a box saying, yes, they are aware that this information is provided and they still want to move forward with signing. So why would we want this kind of information? Because this is an excellent use case for signature insights in terms of phishing detection, in terms of scam prevention, in terms of signature simulation. Say, for example, you're interacting with a chat protocol. So the chat protocol has its contracts deployed on the on chain, and many developers out there would write a DApp around this chat protocol. So when you go to a DApp and you're trying to sign a message or trying to respond to a message from another person, are you sure that you are actually dealing with this chat protocol and not with a malicious chat? Are you sure that you're sending back a message to an address which is a known malicious actor or not? So all of these are use cases where you can look into and use signature insights to sign your data before you actually proceed into it. So we look at a small demo to see how this actually works and what can be done in terms of making the user more safe. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to sign this message. Like I said in my example earlier, it's going to be a chat protocol. And I pulled this message or this data packet from the MetaMask website where you can learn how to sign data with type 4. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating an EIP 712 domain, and the message is going to be a mail message. It's going to be from and to. And let's assume my DApp is collecting information from the user, is creating this message packet, and is now going to be signing this message. And so here are the information that can be checked. This is a contract, a dummy contract, of course. This is a contract which I'm going to be verifying against. This is the from address from a person named Carl to a person named Bob. And these are the addresses. And here's a message that's actually going through, hello, Bob. So let's see how this works when we try to sign the message. Now, I would also like to note that in terms of capturing the insights, what I've done here in my code is in my snap, if I'm the developer working on the snap, I have already marked this contract as a malicious contract. But of course, you would have your own logic to understand more insights about the snap to capture those contracts and determine whether they are malicious or not. When you submit a signature to be signed by MetaMask, it now takes you to an on-signature exposed RPC endpoint. So this on-signature callback is the place where you would be writing your code. And you can see in this simple code, what I've done is I'm checking the verifying contract from the data packet if it's equal to my malicious contract, and then I'm showing a big message with a severity level of critical. So you would have your own logic to determine malicious contact information here, and based on that information, your snap could have a different way in which it reacts to this data packet being signed. So with that said, let me go ahead and try to sign this malicious packet and see what happens. I've already installed my snap So it is up and running, and I'm going to click on this button to send that data packet to MetaMask and see what happens. Okay, so the signature has come to MetaMask and it shows me a brief about what it is. So I am using a mail protocol and I'm sending it from Cow. This is Cow's address, my address, assumably, to Bob. This is Bob's address, and here is Hello Bob. So today with EIP 712, this is the most information that a user would see. Now, when they see this, they don't really know which contract this is dealing with, or is Bob's address manipulated? Is a single letter changed in there? And now I'm interfacing with some malicious actor. This information is unknown here when you see the plain 712 signature inside here. But the moment I try to click on sign, that's when the signature insight comes into play and it goes into that on signature handler and the magic happens. So let's see what happens. I click on sign. Okay, so my signature insight is now saying you are dealing with a malicious contract. And because the severity level was given as critical, it now makes me check on this box before I can actually click on sign. So here's an example where I can actually have my signature insight look deeper into the data that I'm signing, not just with the from and to messages, but also with the contract that it's dealing with, the chain. Am I creating the signature for the right chain, or is a malicious DApp changing the data in my signature and creating fooling me to sign a packet for another chain? All such information can be checked within the signature insight and make it more useful and safer for the user to move forward. So I say, yes, I'm interested in proceeding. I check on this and I click on sign and the signature is completed. So this is useful because unlike transaction insights, where the user sees information about the transaction, here it allows us to provide more information to an end user who's trying to sign a message and thus make a choice of proceeding with the signature or not. This is a feature that's going to be used, in the hackathon for eDenver. So if you are a builder who's trying to write a snap against signature insights, make sure that you look at this and figure out how best you can use signature insights for your snap. With that said, it comes to the end of demo for the signature insights, and now we'll move to the next section, which is dynamic UI. Now, this is a feature which has been long awaited. Everyone who's been working with snaps has been asking us when dynamic UI, because today a snap has to come with a companion dApp. The companion dApp has got all the UI, all the workflows, and then the snap comes into the picture when you're finally doing some workflow to complete that process. But the good news is with dynamic UI, you can now move a lot of that functionality from your dApp into the snap. The ultimate goal is a snap can be released without a companion dApp because everything that a dApp does can now be done within the snap. We've been moving in stages with respect to UI. Initially, we just had alerts and confirmation prompts coming up in the snap. Then we moved on to lifecycle hooks, where you can show a UI when a snap is installed or updated. And then we had the home page where you can go and see information about your snap without having to be in a workflow process. For those of you who have attended my previous sessions on Builder Series, you would have seen how we walked through an entire use case of creating the on install UI, the on update UI, and the homepage UI. So now we have reached the third stage of our UI development where we are going to be talking about dynamic UI. So we have made this release and we are going to be talking about it in eDenver. And again, like I said, the eDenver hackathon is revolving around the dynamic UI aspect also. So if you're a builder at Hackathon, this session is going to be really useful for you. Keep in mind again that both dynamic UI and signature insights are not available today in Flask or Stable, you would have to go to the dev builds that I created earlier, that I displayed earlier, and you would have to download the wallets from there and install that in your browser. Maybe I'll show a quick demo on how to do that in today's session, but otherwise, that is the dev build you'll be using against your projects. So coming back to dynamic UI. This feature allows us to create dynamic user interfaces. So the UI can now have forms on it with data that can be submitted. You can create wizard-like interfaces, which means you can have a next and previous button and move through a workflow and thus cover an entire workflow. We all know that the real estate available on the wallet within a snap is so limited, therefore it's going to be a small rectangular space. So having a wizard kind of an interface definitely helps in having a workflow that can be captured. Today we have these following controls available in Dynamic UI. We have a form, we have an input or a text box, which allows you to put in text, alphanumeric, or pure numeric information. And we have two types of buttons. One is a regular button and one is a submit button, which you would use to submit information on your form. We are working on more user controls that could be put into the user interface. We've asked community feedback, and many of them have shown interest in having drop downs, checkboxes, radio buttons. So all these are in the pipeline. But today, with just the input and the button, you would be amazed at how much we can actually do on a dynamic UI form in a Snap. They can be used in alerts. So when you're showing an alert, today you're used to just showing a simple boring text, but now you can actually show a full UI with text boxes and buttons. You can do the same on confirmation dialogues and also on homepage. And in today's demo, we'll be looking at how we do a dynamic UI on the homepage. Before we jump into demo or code, I'd like to get into a little more deeper about concepts used in dynamic UI. So in dynamic UI, we call every screen an interface. So what you can do is you can create an interface using the snap_create interface method. This one allows you to, as the name suggests, create an interface, put in text, images, inputs, dividers, headings, buttons, and so on. So you can create a full interface which you want the user to interact with. You then have an update interface method. So normally when you create an interface, you might want to change this interface in terms of I want a new button or I want more text boxes added. So you would update the existing interface to now have more controls. Now, each interface has text boxes, like I said, and all this information has to be captured somewhere in state, and that gets automatically saved to something called an interface state. So as a user starts typing on text boxes on input controls, that information automatically gets saved to an interface state. And you can get the state by calling the get interface state. All these methods work with an interface ID. So when you call create interface, it creates the interface and returns you back an ID. And you would use that ID when you call an update interface. So you are going to say, update this interface, which has an ID here, and these are the new controls I want you to update into it. Or you can say, give me the interface state for this ID, and it's going to give you a whole object, which is a key value on the name of the control and the value that it currently possesses. Interface mutation. So this is a concept where you use the Snap Update interface, because when you want to create a new screen and you already have a screen displayed, the only way you can create a different screen is to mutate the existing screen. So you would call the update interface and change how your current screen looks, and then proceed with whatever information you want to capture in that screen. Since you would be moving between interfaces, you would be updating interfaces, you would be getting interface state, it is useful for you to use the snap manage state method. This allows you to persist the information from your interface into a more stable location in memory, because keep in mind, as you update interface, let's say you have two text boxes on one screen, and then you update it to add another text box or a divider, then the previous two text boxes get dropped off from the internal state. So in order to maintain that and persist it, you would need to store it explicitly into the snaps state. If you're capturing sensitive information, store it in the encrypted state. And if you're capturing regular information, you can store it in the regular or unencrypted state. While working with forms, many of us may be very comfortable with elaborate form validations, like having a red border or having a small message pop up or an icon showing up. So these things are not yet available in today's dynamic UI. We have limited form validation, and we'll also see that in the demo as we go through it. But with what is available, we can do wonders, and more elaborate forms of validation will be coming up in future. So let's get into the demo. So the way I want to do the demo is start off where we stopped last time. And what I mean by that is, let me first uninstall the current snap that I have here. Okay, and pull in my previous project. So for those of us who did attend the last sessions, you all may be familiar with the UI which I created for American Airlines. So the American Airlines snap that we created as an example showed us how to create an on-install UI and an on-update UI and a home page. So, and the demo there said that more features are going to be coming to the snap in terms of dynamic UI and how you can actually book your flight ticket. So we'll be looking at that interesting aspect today in how you can book your flight ticket. So where did we stop off last time? It's still building at the back there. Yes. Okay. So this is our DApp we used in our previous Builder Series session. I'll go ahead and install it. And here is the on install UI. So this is, again, a static UI, which shows my American Airlines snap. The limited information or interaction here is to copy your frequent flyer number. But now this on install can also be improved to have a dynamic UI. And when I go to my home page, I see the same logo of American Airlines, but it shows a little more information, which is again static. It shows me my last flight, when it was. I can click on this link. It will take me to the American Airlines website to see my last flight information, or you can see your upcoming flight information. So this is all that we could do until yesterday. But from today onwards with dynamic UI, we can do a lot more. And that's what we'll see in today's session. So to save us some time, I've already completed the coding for the dynamic UI. And I would use that to show the demo. And then we'll look into aspects of how the code works and what happens behind the scenes. So let me go ahead and start this project, which is the one I'm going to demo today, and which is going to have the dynamic UI in it. So, okay, yes. So the site is loaded and the DApp is ready to be shown. So the snap has to be installed first. So let me go ahead and install this new snap. Again, this is the American Airlines snap. Installation. All this is regular, where you see the permissions required. Okay. One interesting thing is you don't have to have any new permissions to work with dynamic UI, because it's already going to be covered with all these snap UI elements. So you already have that in your dependencies. So there's no new permission that's required for it. Let's get into it and see how this UI can be used. Now, again, this UI is going to show you how to book your flight ticket. And I'll walk through this demo at least 3 times. And the reason I want to do that in 3 flows is because first I'll show you the whole demo end to end. Then I'll show you some interesting aspects in terms of validations. And then again, I'll show you some interesting aspects in state management. In this way, you are not bogged down with too much information as you see each step in this demo. So I go to my Snap. And earlier, all you could see was my last flight information and my next flight information. But now you can have this new button which allows you to book your flight. So right here in the home page, how you would go ahead and book your flight is click on the button. It brings up your first screen on the UI. And this is the first page of 5 pages that are going to be coming up in this wizard. Keep in mind that the real estate here is very limited. So the way I would work in collecting the information from the user is through a wizard of multiple steps. Depending on your use case, you may have just a few fields to capture from the user, and therefore you could go with fewer screens or just one UI page. We'll do the happy path first with no problems and just move through the demo. So who is the passenger who's going to be flying? I need to be booking a ticket, so I'm putting in my name. That done, I'm going to the next step. It's going to be asking me, when are you flying? And this is step 2. I currently have only text input controls. There are no date controls released in this version of the dynamic UI, but that could come soon. So I'm just going to be having a regular text box to accept my date. So I'm going to be flying tomorrow, which is 24th. And I'm going to be returning 1 month's vacation, so 03/24/2024. Now, when I'm booking my flight, I'm interested to know, can I have a flexibility of 2 or 3 days? What if my flight ticket is too costly here? Can I have the next day or the previous day? So I would like to provide a plus or minus days in terms of flexibility. So here's another avatar of the text box where you can have a numeric field. So here I can use the keyboard to move up and down, and I'll say, okay, I have 3 days flexibility in my flight dates. As you can see, this is a wizard, which means I have a back and a next button. But since I'm doing the happy path, I'll go forward with the next button now. And in my second or third round, we'll look at all these other aspects. So moving to my next. Now it's asking me where my starting and ending destination code is. So I want to go to New York from Denver. So I'll put in DEN is my airport code and NYC is my destination airport code. And since I'm just doing a demo, I'm not doing a multi-city or a round trip or all of that fancy stuff, but you could do all of that in this dynamic UI. Next. I'm at the last screen or second to last screen. It now asks me to review my information, and I do have my passenger name, start date, end date, flex days, from and to. Now, of course, when you are booking your flight ticket on a major airline website, you know how much you can customize stuff, how much you can select a flex seating, or you can select an extra room space for your legs, or you can select an exit row, book your baggage, and all of that. So all of those aspects are going to be part of booking, right? Which we cannot definitely put here. I mean, you can have 20 steps in your wizard to do it because of the real estate, or you can do a more clever tactic where you have your UI, which captures the main information that you want, and then take that information to the website. So that's the approach I've followed here in this demo for today. This is the main information, and I'm going to be creating a voucher using this information. Creating the voucher could be a process where you call an API to your service, passing all this basic information, create a voucher, and now I can go ahead and use this voucher on the American Airlines website to purchase my ticket. So all I do is copy this voucher, and I can go to the American Airlines website, There, I would be asked to enter the voucher, which means my basic information is already there. And from there, I can do all the fancy stuff of legroom, baggage, and so on and so forth. So once my whole process is done, I have the congratulations screen. I can have a nifty looking image over there with the final message. And at the end, I just return back to my home page. So with that, we see how we can do a full UI on this snap with information being limited to each and every screen. This definitely is a great improvement in having just alert or a prompt dialogue, but now you can have a lot more. And you can do all of this UI right in an alert message or a prompt message or on the home page. We would soon be having a feature where from your DApp, you can deep link into the home page, which means the user can just click a button on the DApp and it opens straight away into the home page and they are brought to this screen. So now let's have a second round of the demo to see the other aspects of what else you can do in the UI. So again, I'm going ahead and booking my flight. Let's look at validation aspects. So if I click on next, I can write validation and show errors, and I can say, oops, your first name cannot be empty or your last name cannot be empty. And until you resolve these errors, you cannot move forward. So let's say I just put in my first name and move forward. It does again a check and says, well, you have a last name that has to be entered. So I go ahead and put my last name, Christopher. Okay, it clears the errors and it goes next. And again, here I have my validation running. If I click on next, it gives me the errors saying start date, end date, flex days. So I comply, I go with all this information. Another thing I want to point out here is the keyboard navigation works. So I'm doing tab and I'm going to the next control and I'm using the up and a down arrow key and I'm setting the flex days. I'm using tab and I'm going to the back button, tab, next button. Hit enter and it moves to the next button. So validations cleared and I'm on my next page. Again, here I have validations which says starting and ending airport cannot be empty. So I put in that and I put in that and I get to my voucher screen and I can create my voucher. Good. Now let's do a third round of this demo and see how we are managing state. So start it off again, book my next flight. I'm here, I'm putting in my name. So when I go to the next screen, like I said earlier in the talk, we have a Snap create interface and a Snap update interface. So what happened when I went to my home page was I created the interface. Let me talk about that as I'm working through a demo. So here I've created an interface, and this interface is static information such as a text, a copyable, text and link, and a button. When I want to move to the next page, I have to call an update interface, which is going to mutate this particular screen. So I book my next flight. It has mutated it. It has removed the previous controls and it has put in new controls, which is text box 1, text box 2, and a button. So I go ahead and put text box 1, text box 2, and the next button. Now, when I click on next again, I'm going to be mutating the same screen, removing these text boxes and the button and putting in next screen content, which are these three buttons, three text boxes and the button. Now, as I move from interface to interface or screen to screen, you can get the information that the user has been putting in here by calling the third method, the snap get interface method. So the snap get interface method for this particular screen is going to return you back an object with three key value pairs. The first will be start date and the value. The second will be a return date and the value. And the third will be a flex days and the value. We'll look at this in code once we're done with the demo. So it's important for you to understand how you collect the state from these controls. So what I'm doing when I click on next or back is I'm immediately going to be calling the snap get interface state, pulling the information, and then persisting it in my main state area. So I'm going to be having a booking object, which I'm going to be storing in the snap state. And this booking object will keep on be getting incrementally updated as I'm collecting data from each screen. I'm going to be using that state, that persisted state, to repopulate controls when I revisit the page. What do I mean by that? When I go to the back button, it's again going to come back to the previous screen. I'm again mutating the interface and putting in first name, last name, and I'm using my persisted storage to pull back my name and show it on the screen. In this way, the user can move back and forth and check the information that they are putting in before the final submission. So if I go back, click on next, I'm going to put in my start date and date. And again, keep in mind the validation here is how much ever you want to have. All I'm doing as a validation in this demo is check if there is an empty string and if there's a number and move forward. But you could have more business logic saying, is this an old date? A date in the past, or is this too long a duration, 2 years for the flight? So all of these validations you are free to add in, but all I'm doing for my validations is checking for empty fields and moving forward. And as you can see, I am able to get the data again from my persisted storage and show all the screens here. So going back with empty information is fine because I can do a back from here, but my validation doesn't allow me to move forward if I leave it empty. So if I try to go forward, it again gives me an error. So I have to satisfy this requirement on my screen, and I'm now able to go forward. And finally, you have this review screen and where you can create your voucher and complete your process. If you're having a wizard type of a scenario, then it makes sense to provide some information to the user in terms of which screen is this? Is this the third screen? How many more screens you got? So I put in a page X of Y over there, and you finally get to create your voucher and you're done. So this is really exciting because with the limited amount of functionality that is currently available in terms of just a text box and a button, I can create a whole workflow in which I can capture flight information, and then of course take that to another website where I can put in the voucher and continue my process there. But in many cases, we may not have such an elaborate process. We may just have a scenario where you want to collect few pieces of information, do something, call your API service, validate the information, and move forward. So this is definitely going to be a game changer in trying to move all our functionality from the dApp onto a Snap. So with that done, let me jump into the code and see how all this exciting stuff is actually happening. So I create my template using the Snap template monorepo, which means it creates a monorepo with these two folders in it, and all my code is written in the Snap. Like I said, I have very little dependency on the dApp other than installing the Snap, which I can also do from the directory, but all my code is now written inside my Snap. In order to follow the code, because there's a lot of code, I like to take you all in a phased manner. First, I would like to show you all the UI and how I created it. Each UI is just a function which creates a panel and all these UI elements in it. For those of you who have done alerts and dialogues, you must be very familiar with these elements where you create a whole panel using text copyable and so on. So it's the exact same thing that you create a panel. This function is going to be creating the home page, which means it's going to be creating an interface. So I call the create interface method and I say, this is my interface I want to create, and it's going to be returning back an interface ID. And this is the ID you would keep in order to keep mutating the interface as you move through your wizard. So this method creates your first page or your first interface. And when I click on the next button, it needs to be creating the next interface, which is where I collect my information for the names. So here you see I'm passing in an ID, which is the interface ID, which I obtained from the previous function. This is the interface ID for whose interface I want to keep modifying it. So I'm going to be calling the snap update interface. And the first parameter that I'm passing in here is the ID. So the Snap platform knows which interface it's going to be mutating and modifying. And here you see the first instance of our new controls. We are having a form control, and inside that you have its name. And then you have the number of children in that control. Here I'm having two text boxes, which is first name and last name. You can have a placeholder. We can have a value, which will be used to hydrate the previously entered values. And finally, we have the button in here, which can be a button type or a submit type. We have two variants in the button, which is a dark blue button called primary, or just an outline button called the secondary. For major or important steps, you would use a primary button variant. Otherwise, you would use a secondary variant. So key things to note here are the names, because when you call the get interface state, the object that returns is going to be a key value pair with this as a key, and the value is whatever the name you have entered. And that's how you keep pulling in information from each interface and then adding it to your main persistence, which will be the booking object. Also here, I want to show how I did the validations. When I show the screen the first time, I'm just going to be having the first name, last name, and the button. And then when I click on the next button, the validation is going to happen. It's going to check the values by calling get interface state. And if the first name and last name are empty, it creates a string array of the errors. And then it mutates the same screen with the same screen, meaning I call the same method again, and I'm passing in the error object in here. So when the screen comes up the first time, the error object is empty. The error array is empty, so there are no errors displayed. But when I call the same method again with the errors, two errors in here, it's going to come in here and it's going to create error fields, which is basically the heading, the divider, and an error number 1 and error number 2 as text messages, and adds it to the same interface. So now I'm able to see my first name, last name, and the errors. And now if I correct my errors and move to the next screen, since there are no errors, it goes to my next form, which is the dates. So in my date screen, the same whole thing carries on. I pass in my interface, I call update interface, and I'm drawing my controls, the start date, end date, buttons, so on. If it's called the first time, my errors are empty, so it goes clean. If there are errors, the same method is called back again with the errors, and I display my errors at the bottom. So that's how I designed the UI for this one. But of course, you may have a better way to do it. So feel free to explore and work on this. But each UI of mine is just encapsulated within a function, and I call these functions based on the buttons that are clicked until I finally come to my final page and then return to home page. So let's quickly see how I'm wiring all these methods by having these button clicks and managing it. So I go back to the main page or the main file, which is the index. And again, for those of you who have already developed snaps, you know that there is an RPC handler. And I just show the signature insights where you have the signature handler. For the home page, you have the home page handler. And you can see here that on my home page, I am showing the first page, getting my interface ID, and I'll be using this interface ID for all the other purposes. The main method I want you to focus on is the onUser input handler. So this method is going to be called whenever you click a button on the screen. Every button that you click is going to be coming here to be handled. You have an ID and an event parameter. The ID would be the interface ID. where that button is located, and the event would be what the event is occurring. You can look at the event name and figure out which button has been clicked. And like I pointed out on the previous methods, where you have a name for each of your control, those are the names you would be checking in here. So you can see here, for example, when I'm on the flight date screen and I click on the next button, it's going to come into this handler and fall into this switch case. I'm validating the form and I'm getting my errors. If my error length is 0, then there are no errors and I go to the next screen, which is my airport codes. But if my errors length is greater than 0, then I show the same form again by passing in the error, which means the same form again is displayed. It gets information from my state, puts in the partial data that has been entered, and also shows my errors. So you would wire all your forms by capturing the events raised by the buttons. And then in each of this, I do my validations. And then depending on that, I move to the next form. Or if I'm on my back button, I move to the previous form. And again, for the demo purposes, I have put all of this in one switch statement in this one file. But depending on your cases, you can pull out code, make it a little more, separation of concerns, have your different methods in different files. But this is the general idea of how you would work with dynamic UI. Create your UI, mutate it to show the next screen, capture it by getting all the get interface button, get interface state method, persist it by storing it in the snap storage, and finally you can use that information based on your use case to do whatever is required to be done. So with that, I want to now take a pause because we've looked at the code, we've looked at the excellent demo, and we know now what we can do with dynamic UI. And I would like to now take a pause for a Q&A session if we have any questions. Yeah, I do see a question in the chat, which Kristen has already answered. So yes, we can. No, we cannot prompt a transaction yet from within the snap. Can you show on signature one more time? Sure. So if we look at the code for on signature, where is that code? Yes. So in here, if we go back to my site from where I'm initiating it, here's a util snap, and this is the signature data packet which I am trying to sign. And again, if we do a search for a signed data type underscore v4 MetaMask on Google, you will get a page which will show you this exact data packet. When you send this data packet to be signed, it gets handled by the snap. And if I look into the snap, here is my handler for the signature. So it comes in here with all the information of the data packet that's being signed. And you can check if it is a V4 type of a signature, and then pulling out information from the data packet, in our case, verifying contract. Am I sending it to a malicious contract? If yes, then I show a panel and I'm saying severity is critical, and it shows a red dialog and allows us to handle a signature. So that was a question from Nero. When signing EIP 712, can you show additional data to the user similarly on transaction? Yes, so whatever is the additional data is what you would put in here. So here too, you could have a dynamic UI coming up. But in this case, since you're just showing information, there is no need to capture information from the user. So you can create a heading, you can create an image, a label, dividers, and showing more information, and so on. So that can also be created in the panel. Any more questions? And like I mentioned, the demo, what you have seen in today's code is available on GitHub. So you can go there and get that. And keep in mind also that Flask and Stable do not have these latest APIs. So go to this page and you can pull the dev builds from there and write your code against these dev builds. we will notify everyone once these features are available in Flask. I'm assuming no more questions. Does the user have to press sign in order to show them more data? Yes. So once MetaMask, let me run that again. Yes. So when you click on sign, MetaMask shows the initial screen, which is default today, which shows by default today, where you see the content of the message. But for it to go through the process of a signature inside, you have to click on the sign button. Then it hits the on signature, and then you are able to process that information, do all the nice stuff, and then return back saying critical or not. If you mention it is critical, then this extra checkbox has to be checked. If you say it's not critical or you don't put that flag, then you don't have the checkbox and you can readily click on sign. And like I showed you at the second slide, the critical flag allows you to add some more friction to the flow just to make sure that the user is checking on this box before they can click on the sign. Okay, so if we don't have any more questions, thank you all for attending this session. This session is also going to be recorded and added to the same link of YouTube videos that was shared earlier in this call in the chat. So you can check it out later, or you can share it with your friends and colleagues who are going to be attending ETH Denver and participating in the hackathon. Because again, this is fresh out of the press and we are still working on documentation. So this would be a great resource for you to get into the code and see how it works, and make sure you share this video or the documentation and GitHub link to your colleagues, friends who are going to be participating in ETH Denver. That said, and no other questions, we can wrap up the call. Shaima, thank you for recording. We can stop the recording now. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.
Great job.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Bye.